Hello and welcome to another episode of Upgraded Gaming. I'm your host, Spencer Ryder. And today we're going to be reviewing over Who Goes There? 2nd edition. So let's go ahead and jump right into this and take a look at the summary. So Who Goes There 2nd edition was published in 2021, where the original was in 2018. The publisher is Certifiable Studios. Player count is 3 to 6 players. Playtime roughly 110 minutes. Age appropriate for 14 plus. The gameplay considered cooperative / competitive, which we'll get into some of that later. And the genre is horror. So let's start off talking about the story or theme around Who Goes There. So originally, the story around this comes from a novel that was by John Campbell Jr. in 1938. There have also been 2 other renditions that were movies in 1982 and 2011, all around this same story. So if you're unfamiliar with any of these works of art, then the story is around a research team that's in Antarctica, and they have stumbled upon an alien. This alien is able to devour its victims and then take on the traits, the personality, and the memories, with everyone around being unaware. So that gives you an idea to help build into the theme of this game, which is, well, survival and paranoia. So throughout the game, you're wanting to go through and craft items and develop abilities, which will help you to survive, and then gather as many points as you can towards the helicopter so that you can escape the research facility in the end. So it's very thematically pleasing. I would give this a 10 because everyone is very involved, everyone is very immersed, and tensions continue to ride high all the way into the very end. So let's go ahead and talk about scaling. So there's 2 aspects to consider here. The first one is going to be how many players. It's recommended 3 to 6 players. Now, I would say that the sweet spot is really 4 players, but every additional player that you add is going to drastically increase the amount of time that it takes to complete. And whereas you may be thinking, okay, are people going to be checked out? People are going to be checking out their phones and really just not paying attention to gameplay, but that's not really the case. It's more so, are you actually going to be able to have enough time to complete this game? It could take anywhere from 3 to 4 hours to end up completing the game with 6 players. The second aspect to consider is the development of the characters. Now, as you're crafting and developing new abilities, the game does not become extremely easy. In fact, the game continues to get progressively harder throughout each phase. And so whereas in the beginning you start with 1 die that has roughly a 50-50 shot at being successful, in the end you end up having 5, 6, 7 dice, which is very, very satisfying, but they mesh and scale very well in that sense. Overall, the scaling, I would give a 7. And the only reason why is because of the extended amount of time that it requires to play, even though I don't believe that it breaks any of the mechanics. All right, next we're going to talk about mechanics, my favorite piece. So the mechanics are pretty straightforward in this. Not only are they fairly simplistic, but they're also noted on your dashboard up at the top. So you know exactly how many actions you can take. You got your action cubes, you keep track, you do what you need to do, you spend whatever you need to spend, and voila, your turn's done. So it's very straightforward. Now, an interesting piece to the mechanics is actually the social aspect. The social aspect adds in complexity, in which you have to keep an eye on other players and see what they're up to, because it's all tied in. You don't know if somebody's doing something sketchy unless you are paying attention to what they're doing. And so how you interact with people, how you talk to people, the things that you do and say also come off with, whether or not they trust you, whether or not they're going to trade with you, or they believe that you are trustworthy enough to be on that helicopter at the end. So those are all factors that tie into the mechanics, which is a lot of fun. Now, replayability, you've got 12 characters. Now, whereas they're unique, they're not very complex. So they've got their own special deck in which they have different items that are in there that give them a slight edge in one aspect or another. The doc has more first aid kits. The cook has more food. Makes sense. But it doesn't give them anything that's game breaking or to where everybody's fighting over a single character. It's just it adds in an additional variation into the game in which no two games are going to be the same. You've got, depending on the characters, depending on what you craft, depending on who goes outside when, and all the camp events, there's just no two games are going to be the same. So replayability is quite high. So one of the negatives that I'd like to call out with the mechanics would be the trading. Now, since this is a turn-based game and going one at a time, for trading, if you're going to receive an item, you have to have a cube in reserve. And so, since it is turn by turn, sometimes people will forget to reserve that cube, or you may not anticipate somebody having something that you may need later. So this kind of throws in a kink into the flow of the game. So I would give the mechanics overall an 8. Now, of course, it goes hand in hand with the mechanics. What's the complexity? So whereas the turns are straightforward and the mechanics are pretty obvious, and as you go through, there are reminders of how to do everything, the one piece that is challenging that always requires a reference is gonna be the winning formula. There is a flow diagram in which I will post up here because that is the one piece that it adds in a little bit of additional complexity that you are not going to be able to do without referencing it, I guarantee you. But you play one game of this and you feel fairly confident. You're going to have a good time. You understand the rule set, and you'll be able to move forward. It's not something in which you have to constantly dig into the books and study and figure it out, and it's not going to be very high complexity. So I would say the only thing that's complex is the winning condition formula, in which that is what you need to base your entire strategy off of. So I would at least say that it's a medium complexity because of that. So let's go ahead and talk about unique. What makes this game special, and why is it going to hit your table more often than not? So the first piece that I'd like to call out is that it starts off as a collaborative effort and everyone's working together. But as the game progresses and people become more vulnerable throughout the game, you start to have paranoia set in, and then everyone starts to fend for themselves, and then it's more of a competitive aspect to it. The other factor is with the social mechanics and the standard mechanics, they're both just as important. So a lot of people would not consider the fact that what you do and how you communicate with others depends on how they feel about you. And that's important because that determines whether or not you're going to get on the helicopter in the end. Another thing to consider is the fact that this game is quite challenging to win. But win or lose, it is a very fun experience. And you can't say that about every board game that you play. Overall, I would say the unique factor, I would give a 9. It's very enjoyable, and it's got a lot of factors that really not a lot of games have. All right, now we're going to talk about some quality. Oh boy. Now, this once again is the Kickstarter Deluxe Edition, the second edition, so there are some very nice upgrades in with this game. So first and foremost, the dice. I mean, the custom success dice, the class characters, and their dice that are color coordinated, and with the dashboards that are dual layered, by the way, which have cool little unlocking mechanism going on with it. So it all feels very nice. The item store storage box, which is fantastic because when you're going about crafting, you don't have to go hunting and searching through the box to find the tiles to give to people. Instead, you stay plugged into the moment because you've got everything in this tiered store that's just all nice and ready access. Then in addition to that, you've got the weapon crafting menu. So everybody has their own unique list of the weapons that can be crafted. So everybody has that for reference material. It's very clear, it's very concise. Nobody's asking questions. Everybody knows what they can do and how it correlates with the store. So that's awesome. When you go to put the game away, storage solution, I definitely give that 2 thumbs up. Not only does it have a beautiful inlay that they set up for this game, but inside the inlay, you've got labels that specifically state where the cards go, where the figures go, where the dice go, so you know exactly where everything drops in. And then let's just toss on the icing on the cake, shall we? On the edges of the box, on the inside, it tells you step by step. Step 1, you place this insert in, you put these figures in, and it's got little labels for each of the different pieces. So everything can go right back into the box exactly the way that it should be, because there are quite a bit of components, but it's not a daunting task because everything is very well labeled, very well laid out in the instructions. It's fantastic. And then everything is aesthetically pleasing. You're here in Antarctica, you're off in the cold and secluded, but sure enough, do the dashboards not have snow on them? The board has snow, the cards have snow on them. Everything lets you know that you are in the freezing tundra out there isolated. Everything is thematically pleasing. It is fantastic. All of these components are great. And then, gotta say, with 2.0, this player aid, which you probably can't see very well, is fantastic. Anything that required multiple references to the book in edition 1 has now been changed and added onto this player aid, to where now I don't have to go and look in the book anymore. I can just pick up this player aid and I know exactly these more complex situations that I'm typically referencing in the book now is laid out in front of me, and I don't have to go and hunt and search for it inside the book. So quality, all of these different items, gotta give it a 10. I give quality a 10 for all these beautiful pieces that they have laid out and all these components that they've upgraded for this game. Fantastic. So let's go ahead and take a look at the summary. So overall, the story is a 10, scaling a 7, mechanics an 8, unique a 9, quality a 10, with an overall average score of 8.8. So this concludes our review of Who Goes There. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that this has been helpful. Until next time.